Phantasm, the delusion of a disordered mind, a phantom, a spirit. In 1979, a filmmaker called Don Coscarelli released his indie feature film, Phantasm. The movie, about a 13-year-old boy being pursued by a nightmarish figure from another dimension called the Toolman, got a very small release, but slowly grew in popularity due to word of mouth. Over the next few years, Phantasm slowly and gradually became a cult success, and eventually, nearly a decade later, Coscarelli reunited with the cast and crew of the original to make the sequel, Phantasm 2.
You think that when you die, you go to heaven. You come to us.
In the following 3 decades from that, Coscarelli and his cast and crew would continue making sequels that expanded on the bizarre, nightmarish sci-fi horror mythology of the original, and would continue to expand on the character that captured horror fans' imaginations, the Toolman. Each entry in the franchise was a struggle to fund and a struggle to distribute, but each one was embraced by its loyal fanbase. And now, to many horror fans, the strange little world of Phantasm, which spans 5 movies across nearly 40 years, is one of the best, most underrated and consistent horror franchises ever made. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of alien horror, and we discuss the strange, nightmarish indie fever dream, Phantasm. Boy, welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Munzer, and as ever, I am your host. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres one series at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 7th series exploring the evolution of alien, sci-fi, and cosmic horror, and this is part 10. And as that intro suggested, in this week's episode, we're exploring the world of Phantasm. I'm very, very excited about this because I think there's some really interesting stuff to discuss, particularly with the original movie. So we're going to be discussing the original film from 1979 in spoilerific detail, so check out the movie if you get a chance before listening to our discussion. Then in the second half of the episode, me and my guest will discuss the sequels, but I will only say minor spoilers for the sequels. We don't really talk about any of them in depth. We spend sort of 5 to 10 minutes on every one of the sequels, so you can probably listen to that second half of the episode without having seen any of the subsequent movies. So let's get straight into it. Joining me to discuss all things Phantasm, a very good friend of mine and friend of the pod. She was last here in our Mind and Body series discussing one of the weirdest movies ever made, Eraserhead, and she's back to discuss an equally weird movie. She's very brave to be back again. Welcome to the podcast, Steph McKenna.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Hello. I'm all right. I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be back.
It's so lovely to have you back. And I like to think now that you're becoming the go-to person who comes in to talk about weird movies from the late 70s that nobody understands.
I was absolutely not expecting that to be my niche, but I keep agreeing to it. And I was like, what am I doing? These are difficult.
I know. As ever, you're an amazing sport to be here this week. But before we get into the film itself, let me just ask you a little bit about this kind of subgenre that we're talking about this series as well. Like, we're obviously alien movies, but also sort of sci-fi horror and cosmic horror, that kind of thing. Are you a fan of this type of movie?
Oh, yeah. Like, who doesn't love an alien film? I was so pleased when I found out that you'd be covering this kind of subgenre because the films are so wide-ranging. You could kind of cover anything, really. And
I know.
I also knew it would feature some of the best films ever. Like, The Thing is one of the best films in history. I love it so much. So yeah, absolutely love alien films, anything cosmic or with other dimensions. I love that anything is possible. They can be really fluid in terms of genre. So, you know, as I'm sure you've discussed before, horror often overlaps with science fiction and even fantasy in these films. And I kind of really like the slippery nature of what an alien film can be.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? And it can literally be anything. I think that's what I'm finding so far this series, is that the films are so different from one another. Like this movie that we're about to talk about is so unique, and it's sandwiched between the Rocky Horror Picture Show that we did last week and Ridley Scott's Alien that we're doing next week. So it's like, this is what I'm kind of really loving about it.
Yeah, just so different. And I think this film came out, or this first film came out the same year as Alien, didn't it? So
yeah,
they're happening simultaneously, but they're very, very different.
Yeah. What do you think it is about this subgenre that makes, like, what is it that works for horror so well with aliens, do you think, and that kind of thing?
I think for me, unlike things like vampires and ghosts, they are such a real possibility. Like, there's got to be something out there.
Yes.
You know, they're real. It could happen. It's like the bottom of the sea. Like, what the fuck is at the bottom of the sea, and what the fuck is in space? Like, these are
so right.
Oh, just absolutely terrifying. And I think as human beings, especially in 2021, we're so smug. We think we know a lot. But aliens still exist somewhere beyond the limit of our knowledge. Like, they could be out there. We don't know anything about them. We think we've got it in lockdown. We're never going to know fully what's out there in the universe. And if I think too hard about the universe, especially if I've had a drink, I can feel like a panic attack coming along. It's kind of...
yeah.
Space is kind of like death to me. Like, it's the complete unknowable. And as we said before, that anything is possible.
Oh, you're so right about that. I know what you mean. Like, that kind of feeling of, like, panic when you think about, like, when you get vaster and vaster and you go, well, what's beyond that? And what's beyond that then? And then you're like, you can't, like, our brains physically aren't designed to understand that, are they? Something that big?
But the universe can't go on forever. What do you mean? It just, there's got to be something beyond the edge. There's an edge to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And making us feel, just the idea of us being so small as well and insignificant. Like, we think we're top of the food chain. But, you know, in an alien film, we are not. We are food for the most part. And so everything that is familiar to us and, our existence on the top of the food chain is just gone. When I was doing this celebrity monster death match the other week on my own podcast, you know, we were pitching monsters against each other. Pretty much every scenario, it was like the alien wins. Like, whatever alien it is, it wins. Whatever other dimensional being wins, because it can shapeshift. It can just change the rules of science. It can do anything, and that it's just endless possibilities. And I think that is really, really terrifying for us as human beings.
It really is. You're so right. What did win, by the way? What won the monster death match?
Depends who you ask. I think mine came down to The Thing versus the Cenobites, and I think the Cenobites had to win because Alien kind of needs something organic to attach itself to, or to kind of replicate, doesn't it? And the Cenobites aren't really natural. They're not biological. I don't really know what they are. So they just bend all conventions. They can just outdo everything. So I had to reluctantly let the Cenobites win, even though they completely repulse me in every way.
Hey, I told you recently, I think some of those Cenobites are quite attractive, Steph.
I cannot believe we're going to have to do a sexy ranking of monsters one day. And Pinhead is going to be your number one.
There's something very sexy about Pinhead. Although, this is something I said after the first film, which I love. And since watching the sequels, I've fallen out of love with Pinhead and the whole Hellraiser universe. But anyway, that's another conversation. But Steph, don't ever watch the Hellraiser sequels beyond about 3. That's all I'll say to you. I
can barely watch the first one. Like, my partner loves Hellraiser, and they make me feel quite sick.
Yeah, they're very icky, aren't they? Yeah.
They're icky. It's almost unwatchably icky. So I have to. I don't think I'll get that far down the line. No. I think I'm okay.
No. Well, there we go. Well, speaking of weird horror franchises that have been going on for a long time, let's talk about Phantasm from 1979.
Tommy's gone. It's hard to believe. It was a good idea not to let your little brother come to the funeral. Hey, I don't like this place.
Something weird is going on up
The
there.
funeral is about to begin, sir.
What's wrong with you?
There's something up there. I saw it.
You got some kind of an overactive imagination or something?
I know you're not gonna believe this, but these things were here.
Oh, give me a break.
In Phantasm, in the first film, we meet a young teenage boy called Mike, and he is coming to terms with the death of his parents at a really young age. And his older brother Jody has moved back into town. They live in a small town. He's come back to look after him, but he's really not keen to stick around. You know, he doesn't want to be there. And at the same time, Mike has started seeing things like he sees the local undertaker stealing a casket after a funeral. He sees some scary hooded figures in the graveyard and these bizarre flying spheres. So Mike goes and speaks to his brother Jody and convinces him that the undertaker, who he calls the Tall Man, is not something from this world and is stealing corpses from small towns in order to turn them into his slaves. And then Mike and Jody join together with their friend Reggie, who is an ice cream man, which is a very noble profession, and they band together to work and try and beat the Tall Man and survive him. And then from that point, all 5 films are essentially a cat and mouse game between these friends and the Tall Man. So it's kind of a battle of good and evil, which moves across time and place. And the more you watch, the less they make sense.
Oh my God. Steph, nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. That's incredible.
Thanks so much.
So first of all, Steph, was this the first time for this podcast? Was this the first time you dipped your toe into the Phantasm world?
Yeah, I hope people aren't angry for me for admitting that, but yeah, don't kill me. This was the first time I'd seen these films. I hadn't seen them at all until recently, not even the first one.
Oh, how exciting. So what did you think of the first one?
Do you know what? I expected to... I thought these might... Because they're low budget, I thought they might be pretty crap, or that I might have a good time watching them, but in a kind of bad it's good way. And my expectations were completely misplaced to an extent. It was far more endearing than I think I could have expected. It's got a lot of heart, especially this first film, in terms of the characters and their kind of interactions and a lot of the bigger themes of the film. So you can just really tell that it's a small budget labour of love. And I've watched it twice now, the first film Phantasm, and yeah, I just think I've just had such a lovely time with it, and I just really underestimated the importance of its influence and of its themes. So for that, I'm very sorry.
Right, do you know what? Couldn't agree more with everything you've just said. Now, I had seen the first one a long time ago. I think when I was a teenager, the first one only, and it was fine. I don't think I remember being that impressed by it at the time. I think I thought it was a bit weird and a bit slow and a bit clunky, and I wasn't that into it. And that's all I'd see, and it had been a long time, and so I revisited it in the last couple of weeks, and I was like, this actually is a lot more interesting than I initially gave it credit for, and there's a lot actually going on here. And I think you're right when you actually think about some of the themes and what it's doing, and just some of the weird images as well, which we'll get into. And it was the first time I'd ever watched anything of the sequels. I'd never seen part 2 onwards, and like you, me and Steph have both been on a journey. We've binge watched all 5, haven't we, this last week? And I was kind of like, with each one, I was like, is this a bit crap? I don't know. But then by the end of it, I was always like, oh, did I love that? And then like by the end of the 5th one, I was like, do I actually love the Phantasm franchise? You know?
I messaged you and I was like, I think I'm shedding a little tear at the end of this 5th film. Like, what the f*** is wrong with me? I'm really emotionally invested.
And I think, I wonder if one of the things, and we'll talk about this more as we go, but obviously it's made by Don Coscarelli, and he wrote and directed it. He really created this first movie and this world. And really, apart from a couple of exceptions, he basically... This franchise keeps the same writer and director, and it keeps the same core cast throughout, right? Across 5 films that span 40 years nearly. That's quite unusual for any franchise at all, isn't it? And there's something where when you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, wow, this has been quite a journey, you know?
Absolutely. Like, I'm part of the Phantasm family now.
Yes.
I feel like I'm part of it. It's, you've got relatives, you love them, that, they've got their flaws, but... I've got to love them.
Yeah. I know. I'm right there with you. And I agree with exactly what you said about how this movie actually really has a heart, and it feels like its heart is in the right place as well with this story. And that's really kind of sweet and unusual in a way as well about a big horror franchise like this, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you, first of all, just about the general vibe of this film, I suppose. Don Coscarelli's direction in this first film particularly, because it's got such a weird atmosphere, hasn't it? What did you think of just the way this film looks, sounds, feels, you know?
Yeah, I mean, as we said, it was an independently financed, small budget film. I think Coscarelli's own mother did some of the special effects and the costumes. Like, it really was small time, and it was filmed over a number of years. Like, it sounds like it took a long time to come together. Despite its low budgetness, I think the look and feel of this film is pretty amazing and quite effective. And as you said, it's kind of all about the heart of the thing rather than the technical skill. So for the most part in this film, in Phantasm, we're rolling around in Michael's head. So we're seeing things from the perspective of a teenage boy, and he's gone through something extremely traumatic, and he's potentially becoming detached from reality. So you really get that sense throughout of the blurring between the dream world and reality. He's not sure where he is or whether what he's seeing is real, and neither are we. So, I mean, phantasm itself, I think, means like an illusion or an apparition or a ghost. So, you know, it's all there. The experience of watching Phantasm for me was very surreal. It feels like all of the components from a teenage boy's nightmare. Like the mausoleum, for example, I mean, amazing set piece, but with all that fake marble and kind of red velvet curtains and statues, it's like a weird, I don't want to say Lynchian, but it's like a weird maze, isn't it? It's like a maze inside a child's brain.
Well, I think there is, and I know I always sound like a broken record when I say this, but there is something Lynchian about this, right? Because, like you say, that blending of the dream world with reality, you don't quite know whether anything you're supposed to take in this film, you're supposed to take literally, or you're supposed to take as a sort of manifestation of a boy's, like you say, everything is potentially taking place in a boy's subconscious or dream, potentially, right? And like, so it has that weird, woozy, dreamlike atmosphere. And yeah, weirdly, you know, after we talked about Eraserhead last time, there are weirdly some similarities, aren't there? Which again, I was not expecting, to be honest. You
they're emerging around the same time.
Yeah,
Eraserhead 77. So I mean, if Coscarelli was making this film for a while, I don't think he is drawing from Eraserhead. But it is quite interesting that they're emerging from around the same few years.
Even when you talk about a dream, a place that's covered in red velvet curtains like a maze, you do think
Come on,
right? Yeah,
Twin Peaks.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. It is, it's a weird movie, and the images don't quite make sense. I mean, one of the first things we see, right, in this film and in this franchise is a guy, Tommy, having sex with a woman, the Lavender Lady, on a gravestone in a graveyard.
It's like a bad porno. What is going on?
It's really weird. What is going on? You do feel like you're watching, yes, exactly, like a straight-to-video porno or something, because it's kind of grainy and quite scuzzy looking. But
badly
also
acted.
it's badly acted, but it's got this kind of quite surreal vibe to it. And then there's that moment with the stabbing, and then this woman immediately turns into Angus Scrimm, the tall man, and it's like, what?
Terrifying.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
And then, like, as soon as we see him, we cut to daylight, and it's like that scene's over, and it's like, what was that we just watched? You know, and there is that vibe the whole way through where you'll suddenly just cut from one image to another, and you'll be like, hang on, what did I just look at? You know?
I couldn't quite work out sometimes whether that was deliberate or whether it was the process of having been quite heavily edited. I think it's probably a mixture of both, but it you know, the editing definitely adds to that fractured feeling, that fractured story.
Yes, and apparently they did cut this movie down quite a lot, and of course, like, as we will probably talk about when we get to the sequels, that there was a lot of unused footage from this first movie. I think they shot
like
a lot.
Hours.
Hours of extra stuff that apparently made the film make a bit more sense, that for whatever reason Coscarelli cut out. And so what you're left with is bags of extra footage that pop up in the rest of the series, but also a movie that doesn't really make any logical sense at all.
But luckily, I think it works because we are dealing with that dream versus reality. You know, is Mike asleep? Is he awake? Is he really waking up in his bed in the graveyard? You know, it adds to that feeling, and it's quite a nice, it's a bizarre but quite nice feeling to sit within.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of let it like sort of wash over you, don't you? Like I was saying to you, I was messaging you, I had my second vax jab last week, which I was very pleased about, but I did get the side effects. I had 24 hours of being a bit achy, a bit shattered, a bit out of it, and I did have a fever. And I sat and I rewatched Phantasm in this slightly fevered state, and it was kind of perfect.
Yeah,
you know? I was like, what is happening?
Even more immersive, like, whoa, trippy.
Yeah, I know, it was amazing. And speaking of the vibe as well, let me ask you about that score, because I'm obsessed with that score.
It's so good. I realised actually that I was listening to it the other day, but I was still logged into the work YouTube account, so they're just going to have like past videos. It's just going to be like lots of Phantasm videos, but it's thoroughly fine. But the score is one of the most effective things about this film, and for me, probably one of the most scary aspects. It has that like goblin-esque Suspiria quality. I think it's the synthesizers. It's kind of funerary as well, like funeral organs. It's kind of, it's got that dreamlike quality where it's sometimes kind of nice. Like the start of the theme kind of sounds quite pleasant, and then it turns into something quite dark and grotesque. Yeah,
you're so right about that. It's dreamy and it's quite beautiful, but it's creepy. I think you're so right actually with Goblin. And actually, I never really made the comparison, but it does actually have a bit of a feel of Italian horror, actually, doesn't it? Thinking about it, it does feel a bit like a Dario Argento film in the way that it doesn't quite make logical sense. And Goblin is right. I also thought a bit John Carpenter as well. A kind of synthy, almost sounds a bit like. I think it was The Fog or a couple of other movies that he did that had that kind of like sort of quite repetitive synthy sort of score. But I love it. Yeah, it brings a lot.
Need to get Phantasm on vinyl, I think. Just be spinning that in the evenings, creeping myself out.
It's so good. And the way that then there are kind of variations of that throughout the sequels. Did you notice there's kind of like different versions of that tune as well? I love it. So let's attempt to talk a little bit about the story of this film. Our main characters, we've got Mike, this 13-year-old boy who's really our main character, right? And his older brother, Jody. What did you think of these two as our main characters and their sort of dynamic, their relationship?
I really bought into their relationship, actually. Like, this is one of the key things about Phantasm for me, is that all of the key players I found really likeable. And Mike is desperate to keep Jody around. He's gone through something that's life-shattering, and Jody doesn't want to stick around because he's a bit older, he's got his own life, he doesn't want any babysitting, and this idea of Jody leaving is really fueling Mike's fear, and he just doesn't want him to leave. He's scared of being left alone, and that very much feeds into the feeling of the whole film. But I really bought their relationship, and I liked that Reggie kind of came in as well as almost like a third brother.
Yeah, so true. I mean, Reggie, obviously, who sort of is a kind of like peripheral character in this first one, and then ends up being like the ultimate hero badass by the end. It's like, what,
He's like the light relief here. He's the kind of funny guy, and then he's the ice cream man, and then he plays such a huge part in the rest of the series to an extent that I did not expect.
I know, really weird. But yeah, I agree with you. Like Mike and Jody, I think there's actually a really sad story, isn't there, at the core of this? Like you said, he's gone through this trauma. He's just lost his parents. The film then starts with Jody's mate Tommy being killed. He's like in a band, I think, with Jody and Reggie, right, or something. Yeah. And people in Mike's life just keep dying, and so he's like, clearly he's got this fear of death, right? And like, I think you all go through that as a kid, don't you? You go through your worst fear of like your loved ones dying, I think, and it does become like a very real mortal panic, I think, when you get to a certain age. And it feels like this film is that fear, right? Isn't it? Like you said, it is the fears and anxieties of a 13-year-old boy dealing with death, basically, isn't it?
I think that's, for me, that was entirely the point of the film, or the bit that I found sort of I don't want to say enjoyable because that's not fair, but do you know what I mean? That was
totally
that's what kept me in, was this idea of this young boy, facing death, grieving. You know, he's gone through something very traumatic. He's kind of obsessed with death as well. Like right at the beginning, he's spying on, you know, Johnny's funeral and he shouldn't be there. And the exact moment where he's going through all of these horrible life experiences, he starts to see these figures. These experiences are very much intertwined. So
yes,
and even the setting, it's called Morningside, like morning side. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I was, you know, this film is about mourning. It's taking many of the scary touch points, especially for a young person, of death and dying, and is kind of turning them into something supernatural from a nightmare to explore.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's turning that fear of death into like a boogeyman, isn't it? Into sort of goblins and that kind of thing, like a childlike version of it. I think that's really clever, and also I find it kind of heartbreaking that Jody, the older brother, is like, yeah, he follows me around everywhere now. He's really worried I'm going to abandon him. And also, by the way, I am going to abandon him. And he's like, I'm thinking about like moving him in with his aunt so that I can go back and be in a band. And like, the little brother's overhearing this, and the little brother keeps following him everywhere he goes, right, to the point where his older brother finds it creepy because it's like the boy's there when he's having sex with someone in the graveyard.
I know.
By the way, why are they all having sex in graveyards? What's that about, Steph?
There's a lot of bonking and boobs in graveyards in this film, and like. And I think they're all, and the lady in lavender, who's an amazing character, by the way, she's amazing. Like absolutely fascinating. She is the tall man. So are they all having sex with the tall man?
Well, this is what I don't understand. We'll get to this when we talk a bit more about the tall man. But why is the tall man turning into a woman in order to kill people? That's very weird. But
I love it.
But yeah, no, I do think there is there's a really sad undercurrent to this wacky story, right? About this little boy who is genuinely scared he's going to lose his last remaining family member. And I remember feeling this morbid fear when I was a kid, you know, suddenly realising that, oh, your parents aren't invincible. What if my parents died in a car crash today? What would that mean for me? Who would look after me? You know, and that's something that a lot of kids lie awake at night worrying about. You go through a phase, right? And I think this movie really hits that feeling
so much. I mean, I still worry about things like that. It's something that I think haunts you your whole life, actually, is the fear of the people you love dying and the fear of death. And the tall man, for me, is death. He's everywhere. He's unescapable, and he's looming and mysterious and scary, and he is death for Mike, and it's the thing that he's been trying to fight and get away from for his whole life.
Yeah, totally agree. And so, like you said, Mike becomes sort of a bit obsessed with death, and he spends most of the film just kind of creeping around after people
with binoculars.
With binoculars. But he's watching this funeral, and of course, like you said, this is when we really first meet the tall man, right? So the tall man is this sort of undertaker type figure in the mausoleum. You first see him in the mausoleum during Tommy's funeral. And then there's that really weird scene when he sees him kind of just like carrying a massive coffin and throwing it into the back of a car. And there is something very creepy about him. But let's talk about the tall man, shall we? Played by Angus Scrimm. What do you think of him?
He's fucking terrifying. He really is. He looks, on the surface of things, he looks like a dusty old granddad. And he's hiding in plain sight as the local undertaker, but this facade is hiding something really evil underneath, and it's that kind of less is more tactic. So he barely says anything. He's got like 2 lines per film. That's a slight exaggeration, but he doesn't say a lot,
and one of them is usually boy.
But what he does say like puts the absolute chill up on you. He's exactly the kind of elderly relative that would have scared the crap out of me as a child.
That is exactly what I thought too. It's like, again, it's like that thing that you do when you're a child where there's that one relative or there's that one man that lives on your street.
That you run away from.
That one man in this town, exactly, that you all run away from. And he's that, isn't he? But again, like kind of exaggerated into this supernatural being. In this film.
Like even his physical sort of presence is exaggerated. They've kind of put him in shortened, I think it's kind of a shortened suit and smaller shoes. So he looks really tall and looming and gangly, and he's Yeah, he doesn't have to do much, so he's kind of fully in control of every situation. He always seems to be one step ahead, but he also barely needs to lift a finger. He can control objects with his mind. He's got this slave army, and he can be anywhere at any time. So it's that kind of unknowable alien fear. Like, we don't know where he comes from in this film. We don't know what his powers are or really what his end game is, but kind of anything is possible.
It's so true. Yeah, you're so right. He kind of... it's really the sort of less is more thing with the tall man, isn't it? Where the less he does, the creepier he is. One of my favourite moments, and I don't even know why I love it, but there's that moment when he just randomly sees the tall man across the street.
Yes!
And it's kind of all goes into sort of slow motion, and Reggie's there and his ice cream van's opening and there's steam coming out of it. And he just sort of turns and looks across the street, and he looks directly at Mike at that point, I think, doesn't he? And then just sort of carries on his way. But it's like a really weird moment, but very creepy.
It's really, really creepy. It's like part, I don't know, some sort of part sexy music video where he's walking in slow-mo, but also really, really freaky. And I would be
a bit of dry ice.
Yeah, it is. It's like dry ice and like really setting the mood there. But then, of course, later on, watching the other films, you kind of learn that he's scared of the cold, isn't he?
Oh, yeah,
so
that is brilliant.
Is he kind of frozen in place just then because he's caught a chill from Reggie's ice cream van? I don't know.
Well, that is so funny, because I was thinking as if they planned that right in the first one, but then by part 3 or 4 they show that clip again and they're like, look, he's scared of the cold, or he doesn't like the cold. But it kind of works. I'm like, all right, fine, yeah, I see what you've done there.
Plays into that conversation we were having before we recorded, where we were like, is this needlessly like complex, or is this genius? Like, does this not make sense at all because it's sort of rubbish? Or is it actually brilliant?
Is it incredible? I know. And I guess, like, you mentioned the lady in lavender. Basically the one sort of female character, and she's a woman that basically gets naked and has sex, and that's all she does.
That's
right?
not
Before
great,
she turns
is it?
into the tall man. This is very much a male story, right? I mean, like, there is no two ways about it, and I think it's unapologetically a male story. It's a story about a teenage boy, about his brother. It's about kind of brotherhood and these kind of pals, I suppose. Is that an issue for you, Steph, watching these movies? That this first film particularly is like super male, I suppose?
With this first film in particular, I don't think it's a problem at all. As you say, it's basically a coming of age film featuring a group of young men. So we're seeing things through the perspective of Mike, a young man. And even though I think the film has many universal elements, it's sort of specifically exploring some of the anxieties of a young teenage male. So, a boy who's had to face something very traumatic at a young age, who looks up to his older brother, he's scared of losing him. The film sort of features all of those things that you'd kind of expect, quote unquote, young men to care about. So they're playing guitar in a band and fixing cars with their older brother and driving around in flashy cars and discovering sex. And do you know what I mean? I think within the context of this first film, that is absolutely okay. And it sounds as if a large part of Phantasm's fan base over the years has been younger boys. So there's obviously something there that's specifically tapping into their experiences and insecurities. I think it slightly changes going forward in some of the other Phantasm films, but I think for this one in particular it works.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's like a weird sort of, even though at times it could verge on being a bit creepy, there's a sort of innocence to it. So yeah, you're like, actually funny, because you're a big Stephen King fan, right? There's something of it almost that reminds me a bit of, Stand By Me, or like you say, those kind of coming of age stories where, yes, there are some like slightly weird, creepy moments, but that's kind of what 13-year-old boys are like, right? Or whatever.
Why would you watch your brother having sex?
Yeah.
Like, objectively, that's a bit weird, but it's not when you're younger and you're kind of fascinated and, you're just discovering
figuring
young women.
Stuff out.
Yeah, you're figuring stuff out. So watching this film, I didn't have a problem with that at all.
And I think you're right about that, about it kind of tapping into a certain generation of people or at a certain time. In fact, I actually got sent a message, and I thought I'd read it out because I thought it was quite apt, because a listener basically, I think, knew that we were going to cover it this week and sort of sent me something really nice. He sent me a screenshot, actually, of a book. Don Coscarelli wrote his own book. I don't know if you've heard of this, Steph. It's called True Indie. And sadly, I haven't had a chance to read it, but I've picked up a copy because I plan to read it. I'm just showing it to you now.
Yeah.
But it's all about indie filmmaking, basically. And it's like the story of him and his career as a director. Apparently it's a really good book, but there's a shot in it of a letter that Angus Scrimm wrote to the distributors. And he wrote it, I think, just before the release of the first Phantasm film. And I'll try and read a little bit of it, because it says the letter, if Phantasm achieves the distribution we hope for, one of the fascinating prospects is that inevitably, the way things fall out statistically, a large portion of the young among your worldwide audience will be seeing a horror film for the first time. Thus, Phantasm will forever be the archetype of horror that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives, the original by which they measure every subsequent horror movie, to the extent that Dracula and Frankenstein were to my generation. The Tall Man will be their Karloff or their Lugosi. All of the nameless nightmares of dreaded evil at last embodied, etched in amber of their consciousness for as long as they each shall live. So he put this in this letter casually to a distributor.
What an eloquent letter!
I know. And so this listener sent me a screenshot of this. His name's Chris Newton, and he said, "Hi Mike, just wanted to drop you a line. I don't know if you've read Don Coscarelli's book, True Indie, but it includes this letter from Angus Scrimm, just before Phantasm's release, which I think captures why it occupies such an important place in my heart and so many other people's hearts. I can't say which was the first horror film I ever saw, but Phantasm was certainly one of them. I was 13, the same age as Mike, and just like Angus predicted in his letter, Phantasm for me has been the archetype of horror that I've carried throughout my life, the original by which I have measured every subsequent exposure to the genre. The Tall Man is my Lugosi, all my nameless nightmares of dreaded evil embodied and etched in the amber of my consciousness. I wonder how he felt almost 40 years later when Phantasm Ravager was Angus's own final dramatisation of death in film for his own everlasting resting place. Ravager gets a lot of stick, but I personally think it's wonderful, and I'm so glad we got to see the actor's curtain calls." And we'll talk about Ravager later, but I thought that was really nice, and I think that sentiment, I feel like there's a lot of people that have that experience with Phantasm, exactly like you said, Steph, that maybe there's a certain generation, particularly of boys, who saw this at an important age, and it's meant a lot to a lot of people growing up, you know?
I think I completely agree, and that's so lovely, isn't it? That's made me like this film even more. It's kind of it does feel like it could be an early entry horror film for like a young horror fan, that kind of bridge between I don't know, like Beetlejuice and slasher films, you know, in your young adult years. It's sort of, do you know what I mean? It's kind of occupying 100%. A middle ground space. Yeah,
it's a sort of like middle school horror film, isn't it? Like, if that's to kind of make up a term. I remember, you know, when I was young and I watched the TV adaptation of Stephen King's It as a kind of impressionable child, and I guess that kind of did a similar thing for me in a way. Absolutely terrified me, but it still like really excited me at the same time. You know? And watching it as an adult, for me, the kind of the jump scares, as in the critters, the gore, the you know, these kinds of things, they're not necessarily scary to me, but the ideas behind them, the themes that we were speaking about, so, you know, the idea of your parents dying, being left alone, being young and feeling abandoned, all of these things scare me as an adult, and the idea of someone having to go through that really scares me, and the idea of a man coming along and taking your parents and enslaving them is terrifying. Yes. So let's talk a bit about that, because this is where we go into bonkers sci-fi alien territory, right? So, and I think this starts to be revealed with the scene where Mike goes to the mausoleum, right? And he encounters the Tall Man and the Silver Sphere. So he goes into this creepy mausoleum, which is, by the way, an awesome production design, isn't it? Amazing. That mausoleum, love it, absolutely love it. It looks, every time we're in one of those, I'd love it. Every scene that takes place in there, but then we get the attack from the spinning silver ball, and again, this has been an image that has become so iconic and part of the Phantasm franchise, hasn't it? What do you think of that? What a strange weapon! This kind of flying silver sphere kind of drills its way into people's skulls. What do you think of that whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely iconic, isn't it? I mean, when I was saying that I hadn't seen Phantasm before, one of the things I did know was sort of visually I could picture the Tall Man, and I can picture the spheres.
Yes,
and kind of the red of the front cover. Like, I've seen that artwork before, and the spheres are something that I recognise as part of Phantasm, despite the fact that I hadn't seen it. And I mean, they are good fun. They are completely mad, like bonkers mad, and only something that Coscarelli could think up in a kind of feverish nightmare, which is, I think, partly what happened. He'd had a nightmare in which he was chased down a corridor by a flying silver ball. So, like, only your sleeping brain is going to come up with something like that. They make almost no sense, and they do feel like something strange and freaky that a child would dream up as a kind of weapon to attack people with. I quite like, and there's quite a lot of this with these films, the kind of formulaic quality through all of these 5 films you get, where each time these spheres chase someone and then they attach to their head and they drill a hole in them and the blood spurts out. I kind of liked the way it kind of rhythmically happened in every film.
I know. There's something kind of satisfying about it, isn't there, I think, when it drills into the head.
Oh, here we go. Stop, drill, and then...
I know. And it's because it's so bonkers, because it's so all over the place when it's moving around, you know, and then it's the way it suddenly stops dead and it becomes so static all of a sudden.
And they just wait for it to kind of so mate, detach it from your head, mate. Like, stop it, you can get away.
I know, it's so funny. It's like the actor clearly has to freeze in place for a moment while it drills. It's so good. I love it. I think it's really weird. It's the adjective I'm using for everything in this film, but it's really weird. I like that it's this kind of glossy metallic sci-fi offset against this like gothic graveyard mausoleum.
So true.
You know, what a weird combination of things. You're right, it was literally dreamt up by Coscarelli, and it feels like something just dreamt up in somebody's head. And it is really cool. I find myself with all 5 films really looking forward to the moments when we see the silver ball, because they're always actually surprisingly sort of sparing with it. Like, actually, considering it's quite an iconic part of the franchise, usually only pops up once or twice per film, doesn't it? I think?
Not around a lot, actually. That's a really good point. Maybe until 5, where things go...
Oh yeah, where there's like silver balls destroying
the wheels
buildings.
Like properly fall off the wagon at that point. It's like fully batshit. They're destroying like high rises and it's mad. But you're right, they appear every now and again sparingly, and you're kind of waiting for that moment. And it's really enjoyable, it's really cool and satisfying when they're there. It's
really cool. And there's some really, really cool stuff here where the tall man then chases Mike after the silver ball has killed that other guy. Yeah. And he traps his fingers in the door. His fingers come off. This yellow liquid squirts out. It's
like the embalming fluid.
Yeah.
It's all of those kind of... I think Coscarelli spoke about how he was also inspired by what goes on in a mortuary, or what goes on, those kind of death rituals, what happens when you die, what happens to the body, what an undertaker does, all of those kinds of mysteries. And again, you can imagine a child being really frightened about that. I'm quite scared of that. There's all these things, like he's an undertaker, he's bleeding embalming fluid, they somehow keep ending up in a mortuary or a mausoleum in each film.
A mausoleum is a weird thing. Funerals are a weird thing. Embalming is a weird thing. And I think this film makes you reckon with all that, doesn't it? It's like, wow, what a weird tradition of things we do with loved ones, where it's like we shove all these like weird chemicals into them to sort of preserve them so that we can then store them in a casket on in what looks like a giant kind of shelving cabinet in a mausoleum. It's weird.
Why do we do these weird rituals? Yeah. Doesn't make sense, and we have dedicated so much time actually to demystifying them. I think nowadays there are quite a few like books out there where sort of mortuary assistants and embalmers and people have written books sort of demystifying the rituals of death and what goes on behind closed doors at funeral parlours and all those kinds of things, because we're desperate to find out and make sense of it.
I guess it usually comes back to the fact that we, especially in the Western world, are just quite repressed people, aren't we?
So
and
much.
Like we basically do not like to... We don't like to sort of confront the abject of death, do we? The fact that our bodies decay and rot and degrade, and that there's all this kind of gross stuff happening to the human body. That when we die, we basically just go into the earth and become dirt.
Yeah.
And there's something about all that we just do not want to confront, I think, and face to.
No, we want to hide it in a massive mausoleum, which is just completely sterile and white and marble and houses weird statues, and everything just feels completely is completely disassociated from the reality of what death and dying is. It's it's very bizarre.
You're right, it's really sterile as well, isn't it? There's something very clean about those mausoleums, the inside of them as well.
And they're like a labyrinth. Like, how do you, once you're in there as a small boy, how do you get out? It's
exactly. And again, there's that feeling that this is all a 13-year-old boy not understanding this whole process of embalming, of funerals, of death, of grieving, and again, all coming out in that tool man. So like you said, that what looks like embalming fluid coming out of his fingers when his fingers come off. And then you get the weird little minions, right? And as it turns out, this is, and correct me, I'm trying to figure this out as I talk about it, Steph, so I might be wrong here. He is killing people / stealing bodies, crushing them and turning them into these little sort of goblin minions, who then sort of work for him and become slaves in another dimension that he walks through a portal into this other dimension through these two forks in this room in the mausoleum, right? Is that about right, size of it?
I think so. That was about the gist of it. There's kind of a red planet, and I'm not sure what they're being enslaved to do. They're just his slaves. They just do stuff for him, really.
Because whenever you see images of them on that red planet, they're all just like queuing.
They're just queuing for something. It's just a very British sentiment there. They're just all politely queuing to do some sort of work for him. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, if there is ever a better depiction of hell, it's just that you're all stood in a queue that you don't know what for on some red planet forever and ever.
I tell you, actually, quick anecdote. Once I went to an event and I joined a queue. It was there were various attractions and kinds of things, and I joined a queue with my friend to go, and we were like, oh, this looks good. There's a big queue for this, so blah, blah, blah. And then after about 20 minutes, I was like, oh, the person in front? Like, oh, what are you queuing for? And they were like, oh, we're not... I don't know. We were just following the person in front. And when I eventually got to the front of the queue, it was just a bunch of people hanging out, and we just all formed a queue behind them because we thought something good was happening.
So good, isn't it? That's like a kind of psychological experiment. It's like, if you start a queue, let's just see what happens and who will join it. And it's
people
so true.
Always
we
join
all do. We all do. Oh my god, that's so true. That's hilarious. That is so funny. But yeah, that's we don't really find out, you're right, what they're doing on this other planet. They're all just standing in a line, kind of moving slowly or shuffling along. But
I think I wasn't... They were fine, weren't they? I was less fussed about these kind of minions. They reminded me a bit of the... I think I like the Jawas in Star Wars, like the little hooded figures in Star Wars. They kind of felt 100%. A bit fantasy 100%. To me. Yes. Something a child would be scared of.
Exactly. And, I'm sure maybe this film was partly... it was 2 years after Star Wars, wasn't it? I wonder if there was any inspiration there from those. But yeah, I think that's it. Again, it feels like it's dreamt up in a child's head. There's something kind of cool, I suppose, about the height difference between the tall man and his minions, which is kind of interesting. And they're kind of creepy when they sort of run around in the dark and chase after him in groups.
When we see their faces later, they're pretty horrible. Like, they're not... Yeah. I don't want to be jumped by one of those at all. I don't know why they're in canisters. Like,
I know. There's so much that I don't know why.
No, and I think the key thing about this film is that if you try too hard, if you spend your time trying to pick at plot holes and try and shape it into a fully coherent narrative, it's just not going to work. And I kind of started trying to do that, and then once, like 20 minutes in, once I sort of just let myself go and go like, it's not going to make sense. I had so much fun with it. But you have to go with the flow. You can't fight against it. This isn't the sort of film, where you can pick plot holes. And I think that's fine, because it wasn't intended, or by the sounds of things, it wasn't intended to be some sort of... It wasn't really intended to make sense. So it sounded like Coscarelli was quite happy to kind of try things out on set, improvise, cut things out, add things in. And it was all a bit of an experiment. He kind of wanted to try things out, have fun with it. And if that was his intention, to have fun with it, then it doesn't really matter that it doesn't make sense.
Totally. And, like we keep saying, it is playing out like a dream of a young child, which it might actually literally be.
It could.
Like, according to the end reveal. I don't quite know. I think that all gets a bit muddled by the sequels, doesn't it?
So much.
Because then it's like, well, then we do have to actually turn this into a full-blown sci-fi kind of universe. And it's like, that's when it all goes a bit bonkers. But in this film, if you take this film in isolation, which at the time, you know, Coscarelli had no plans for a sequel, and you take this film as it is on its own, I think you're right. It doesn't matter. You don't have to make sense of it. The point is, it doesn't make sense. The point is, it's this weird fever dream. And yeah, in some ways, the less you understand, the creepier it is, right? I mean, I think that often the scariest movies are the ones I don't quite understand, you know, going back to Eraserhead, for example. You know?
There's something about that not knowing, isn't there? And it ties back to the alien concept, the concept of the other. Like, you can't put a finger on it, you can't understand it. Doesn't matter.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't
and
matter.
the uncanny, isn't it? There's a lot of the uncanny in this movie with the small little minions, with the tool man. I love that image, you know, when he's lying in bed and suddenly it zooms out.
Yes.
He's in the graveyard and the
That's
tool man
so
is looming
good.
over him, and then the people
Tiny
come out
at
of the
the
ground.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's so well framed, isn't it, that moment?
So good. And that's the thing, it's like, he was prioritizing these amazing images over logic and story, you know.
And I think it looks fantastic, as we said, so quite happy to roll with that.
And I wonder whether this also was an inspiration for A Nightmare on Elm Street, you know, for Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, because I think there are a lot of similarities, even so much as like this kind of boogeyman figure.
Yes.
You know, the fingers being chopped off and the kind of freaky yellow liquid coming out. And then we'll talk about the ending, but the ending is very Nightmare on Elm Street as well. But, you know, I wonder whether Wes Craven at all was inspired by
Nightmare on Elm Street was the first film that I thought of, actually, in terms of what this film might have had an influence on, and kind of the slasher genre more generally, as well. As you said, that kind of final scare at the end where the tall man comes back and grabs Mike through the mirror, you know, that last cliffhanger, that last scare really feels like a sort of slasher influence there.
The way in which A Nightmare on Elm Street sort of feels like a bit of a kid's nightmare meets adult horror, and also it's a kind of more streamlined, a version that makes sense more than Phantasm, because it's like, okay, now we're going into a dream, now we can do this wacky things, now they're waking up and it's normal world again, and it's like a little bit more streamlined, whereas this movie's a bit more all over the place. But I think there are definitely seeds of Elm Street in this film as well.
Absolutely.
Also love, so it goes even more bonkers when the fingers come off. Then he takes a finger back with him in a little box. Mike keeps a finger, puts it in a little box. The finger's still moving around. The finger then becomes a bug. The bug then attacks him, crawls on his hair.
Critters.
It's like, what's happening? It's so good.
It's so mad, isn't it? And it is just like you've asked a kid, like, what sort of thing? Like, tell me a story. What happens next? It's like, and then a big spider comes out and attacks you. Like, it's great.
Exactly that. And all of this is offset against this sort of weird sort of humour as well. There's like a whole sequence where Jodie and his mate Reggie just like play guitar and like have a little jam together and stuff as well. That's quite strange, isn't it?
Literally had no idea in that moment. I mean, it's quite a nice moment in terms of Reggie and Jodie's friendship, and I think it's supposed to introduce the tuning fork, but I still don't understand the concept. Do you understand the concept of the tuning fork?
No, as in like the importance of the story, or just a tuning fork in general?
Well, there's like a tuning fork that turns up quite a few times throughout all of these films, and I think it's
basically is like it's the mirroring the two poles that link us into the other dimension, because you know they make a humming noise.
Yes,
like in that room. And I only realised second time round watching Phantasm, like you're right, they really focus in on when he hits that tuning forks and it makes that buzzing noise. I was like, oh, like the portal to the other dimension.
Oh, thanks for explaining that to
me. I mean, I still don't know what its relevance is to the narrative and why there are so many tuning forks, but you know, whatever.
It was a nice bonding experience for Reggie and Jodie, I feel. We're getting a sense of, you know, young lads in a band chilling out, having fun.
Exactly. That real sense of kind of like bro. I want to use a term that's nicer than bromance.
I know.
But there's a bromance feel, isn't there to this film?
Male friendship, it is so much.
Male friendship,
This film is... I kept laughing at this film, but I couldn't quite grasp whether the bits I was laughing at were playing. Like, is it unintentionally funny? Is it playing for laughs? I mean, the bit where Jodie goes into the bar and chats up the lady in lavender, and it honestly takes about 6 seconds for him to be like, yeah, I'm up for it in a graveyard. And then they go to the graveyard, Mike's spying on them, and they're sort of doing whatever. And then when Mike runs across, Jodie's got like her pants in his mouth, and I don't know why he was doing that.
That is, again, we're into like Carry On film Benny Hill territory.
It was a bit camp, wasn't it?
Yeah, really camp, really weird. Yeah, I just, again, like a strange kind of childish charm to these movies where like...
Bit silly.
Yeah, really silly, where even the sex scenes are... Yes, like something out of a 70s kind of like Confessions of a Window Cleaner type movie. You know?
It was so right.
Really funny. I tell you another weird bit that I always forget about. What about when Mike goes to the psychic as well? Because that's also a moment that's sort of... You don't really get anything like that again in the rest of the series, but the psychic woman who like tells him to put his hand in the box and all of that, like that's a weird moment as well, isn't it?
It is. It's like some sort of like he's gone to see a psychic tarot reader at a carnival. Yeah. Sort of. It reminded me of the character in Carnival of the tarot reader who's like...
Yes, Clea Duvall's character.
Yes, and with her daughter. And it reminded me of that so much, actually. And yeah, they're trying to get him to, I guess, conquer his fear. It's all around conquering fear, isn't it? This film, it's Mike is frightened and he's having to, I think he tells himself at the end, actually, when they're trying to trap the tall man, like, don't be afraid. It's all about facing your fear as a young adult. But again, just a really bizarre sequence, kind of fun,
really fun, just really strange because she seems pretty legit, like she seems like she's pretty psychic because of the weird box and everything, and that disappears, and then after Mike leaves she just like giggles with her granddaughter
herself.
And there's something really sinister about it all
really
of a sudden.
really creepy. I liked the signage outside her house as well. There was just like the icon of like the red hand, which I thought looked really trippy and cool.
Really cool. I know, it's just so many cool little moments and images, and none of them quite stitched together, but they're all very cool in their own right, you know. I mean, I guess that's kind of most of the first film, really. And let's just talk briefly about the ending. I mean, we get that kind of big climactic kind of... By this point, he manages to convince his older brother, Jody, and Jody's friend, Reggie, that this threat is real, right? That this tall man is actually doing these things. Because he shows him the finger that is actually still moving around. And so Jody's like, okay, I believe you.
Yeah.
And
straight off the bat, I see what you did there.
And so they then all kind of go up against the tall man. And, you know, we think we've kind of defeated him and we think it's sort of the end. But then there's that very bizarre sort of coda where it's like, oh my God, Jody's now dead. The older brother is now dead. He died in a car crash. It's just Mike and Reggie, the ice cream man, left. Was any of this real? What happened? Like, what do you make of that whole ending?
I know. It was like it's all a dream. But like much like the rest of the film, the ending is completely ambiguous. Yeah. And I had to, the first time watching it, I had to rewind because I thought maybe I had momentarily missed something in the plot that like, did I miss Jodie dying in a car crash? Like, when did that happen? And then so I had to rewind and kind of go, no, I didn't miss it. That this is just suddenly a thing. We're supposed to believe that everything has happened in Mike's head. But then of course the tall man delivers that final scare and pulls him through a mirror. I mean, I like to think that it wasn't a dream.
Well, I mean, this is where it's really difficult to get your head around it, because if it wasn't a dream, then what did happen to Jodie? Like,
I know. And we'll get into this, I'm sure, but later on we still flip-flop between the kind of was it a dream, wasn't it a dream, and Reggie seems to change his mind quite a lot. So sometimes he seems very involved in the action, and then sometimes he's going, Mike, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on here?
Is this whole franchise a dream? And if so, whose dream? Like, who's dreaming? Again, we're back to David Lynch here. Who is the dreamer? I don't really understand, but I'm kind of into it. I like thinking about it and trying to get my head around it, you know? And it's a good final scare. I do really like the tall man coming back and then the hands bursting out of the mirror in the bedroom.
Very, very, very good. And I love that it's kind of that final scare is reused at the end of 2 and 3 as well. It's like a signature ending, isn't it?
It is. And again, almost identical to the Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy's hand bursting through the glass of the door and dragging the mother through.
Had to have been inspired by it.
Yeah, you'd think so. You'd think so, yeah. yeah, a really weird, also kind of sad ending where it's like, oh, his brother's dead too.
Yeah,
he's now
everyone's dead.
He's now just in the care of this random ice cream man who seems very nice, but it's like, is this guy ready to be a legal guardian to this minor?
I know. He seems as just... Yeah, he becomes the brother, really, doesn't he? He becomes the new Jodie. But you're right, that is really sad.
Yeah,
Mike.
really sad. And again, was this whole film actually about Mike not just dealing with the death of his parents, but was this whole thing about him dealing with the death of his brother, really? And him kind of constantly chasing after and following his brother? Is that some subconscious version of like clinging on to his brother's memory, maybe, or something? Who knows? I
think so, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty deep and dark, this film.
So there was so much more to think about than I expected. So much more to think about, and that's why watching it twice now, I really enjoyed it a lot more. I'm so pleased to say that I just thought it was great, and now we've spoken about it, I'm like, oh, it's even better.
I know, right? I kind of want to go watch it again now.
Yeah, off we go.
I really am a fan. It's great, and that's kind of it. I mean, this is one of those movies that was like a very, very slow burn because it had so little money. And I don't think they got like a very kind of small, cheap distributor where it was like they only made about 50 prints, which meant that they had to sort of tour it state by state, town by town. It didn't get like a wide release across the US in one go kind of thing. So it slowly became like one of those slow burn word of mouth hits, I think, over the years, do you think that this movie suffered from its budget? Do you think it would have been better had it had a big glossy studio feel to it?
I don't think so. I think part of its charm is the fact that it was a low budget labour of love between friends and amateurs, and the budget, sort of the quality aspect, arguably adds to that sort of dreamy surrealism. And if you interpret this as being within a young person's head, those ideas would kind of be a bit crude and a bit rough around the edges, maybe a bit 2D in some parts anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be like a slick, fully formed idea in a young person's brain. So I kind of think it all came together quite well. And what's also interesting is that with Phantasm 2, we did get the slightly bigger studio budget, so we can see exactly what this film might have looked like, and it has its positives and its negatives.
Yes, we get the studio version next, don't we? Exactly. So there you go. Let's move on to the sequels. But first of all, I'll as a final question, Phantasm in general, is this still a movie that, like us, there's probably a lot of people that aren't of a certain generation that maybe haven't ever checked out this film or dipped their toe into this world. Would you recommend this film to people?
Yeah, I really would. I haven't spoken to many people about this film, actually, ever. I don't think I've ever had a conversation about this film, so I'm not sure. Lots of people do enjoy it. It is a cult hit, but I don't know many people personally that I'm friends with that have watched it yet, and I would definitely encourage them to. It's kind of, as you say, it's kind of heartbreaking. And
it's it's one of those franchises that I think everyone's heard of, and but like alongside the other big horror properties, the Friday the 13th, the Halloweens, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, even the Hellraisers, it feels like this one has kind of been sort of quietly going on in the background, and everyone sort of knows about them, but not many people seem to have actually watched them, or at least a big group of people haven't watched them. But
I don't know why that is. Maybe it is so big in scope and ideas that maybe it's slightly too much for some people to get a handle on. I'm not sure, but I really love. Or that
they're just sort of that much cheaper maybe than some of these others. They're that much more home. They do kind of feel a bit like homemade movies, don't they?
They really do. And I mean, as I said, I went into this film a bit sniffy, thinking that I'd have fun, but I had quite low expectations, which wasn't fair, and I was probably basing that off the fact that it was a low budget film, and that's a load of rubbish, really, isn't it? Because there's amazing low budget films.
I know, but you can't help but think that. I'm exactly the same. It's so true. That I almost thought it was going to be a sort of not quite as bad as this, but have an almost sort of Plan 9 from Outer Space feel to it.
Yes, like a clunky B movie.
Exactly. But it wasn't that at all. So what a lovely surprise. So before we move on to the sequels, and we are going to discuss the sequels, but not in as much depth, but we are going to go through each of the 4 sequels. But first of all, it's time to go over to a new segment of Wild About Horror. It's been a while since Mary was last here on the podcast, but she's back to discuss her Freudian thoughts on Don Coscarelli's Phantasm.
Hey Mike, Mary Wild here, back for another session of Aliens on the Freudian couch. This week, I'm turning my attention to Don Coscarelli's Phantasm, a cult horror film series featuring the iconic Tall Man, a supernatural and malevolent undertaker who turns the dead into dwarf zombies to do his bidding and take over the world. It all begins when the residents of a small town begin dying under strange circumstances, leading the young Mike to investigate. After discovering that the local mortician is killing and reanimating the dead as misshapen zombies, Mike seeks help from his older brother Jody and their friend Reggie, an ice cream vendor. Working together, they try and lure out and destroy the Tall Man, all the while avoiding his minions and a deadly silver sphere. I'm sure that Phantasm's various plot twists and turns have already been deconstructed in the broader episode, so in this segment I will focus on recurring symbols within the series in an attempt to uncover a latent meaning that might be operating. As a starting point, I'd like to read out a comment from a fellow member of the Evolution of Horror discussion group on Facebook, from Chris of the band Discord. He said, "I know Phantasm is kind of schlocky, and perhaps I only love it as much as I do because I first saw it as a teenager, but it's always had a deeper significance for me." Chris goes on to mention Phantasm's themes of loss, the young protagonist challenging the concept of mortality, the unknowable nature of death represented by the red planet, and the overall surrealism of the series. I completely agree with Chris's perception and would like to build on his assessment. It's interesting to note that the story idea for the original film came to Don Coscarelli in a dream. One night in his late teens, he dreamed of fleeing down endlessly long marble corridors, pursued by a chrome sphere intent on drilling into his skull with a needle. The film's deriving from a dream is absolutely essential to know because the ensuing dream logic of Phantasm requires us as viewers to interpret everything that goes on as a stand-in for something else. Mike is the main protagonist of the series. He's an ordinary boy who notices suspicious activities in the Morningside funeral home where the Tall Man works. After discovering something awry in the funerary procedures, Mike is pursued by the Tall Man relentlessly. The concept of a young person spontaneously witnessing an event that causes agitation, fear, and confusion is aligned with the Freudian concept of the primal scene. The event can be absorbed as a traumatic moment that splinters up development. The uncanny image of a freakishly strong tall man single-handedly depositing a coffin in a hearse is secretly observed and unconsciously constructed by Mike as an enigmatic, violent event which he does not understand. The memory is recorded while he is young and returns in the form of conversion symptoms and obsessions later when he is an adult. We can interpret the primal scene as a disturbing event that halts the innocence of childhood. It is a formative threshold Mike crosses, which forces him to confront darker elements of life he'd previously been blissfully unaware of. Freud refers to the primal scene as an overwhelming unknown, a trauma of the child's excess excitement, which they can't fully process. Jody is Mike's older brother and guardian. Mike is very attached to his only remaining family member and afraid that he'll leave, a fear that becomes reality when the tall man murders Jody. Much of the Phantasm series is predicated on the universal childhood fear of abandonment. Kids are innately hardwired to attach to caretakers, which is critical for the ability to form interpersonal relationships later in life. Whether real or perceived, childhood abandonment interferes with forming secure attachments and negatively impacts future relationships. Usually, perceived abandonment occurs before children are old enough to understand that they are not responsible for others' actions. In that case, children often falsely believe that they are flawed, unlovable, and at fault for the caretaker leaving. The outlandish plot points of Phantasm might represent Mike's internal negotiation in a bid to comprehend why his brother Jody was taken away from him. So much psychic energy is spent trying to construct a narrative for Jody's absence, and this accounts for the prominent death motif locations of the franchise: mausoleums, cemeteries, and dugout graves. Reggie is a family friend who joins Mike's quest to destroy the tall man after his wife and daughter are killed in a rigged explosion. He's an ice cream man by trade, an interesting profession considering the tall man's aversion to the cold, which reinforces the line drawn firmly between them. A running gag of the series involves Reggie's futile attempts at having sex with beautiful women. The impulse towards sex is the photographic negative of the destructive instinct, and here again, Reggie is placed in stark opposition to the tall man, in a similar way that Eros, the life force, and Thanatos, the death drive, are locked in an entwined dual system, destined to combat each other forever. This brings us to the tall man, an alien undertaker, once a 19th century human named Jebediah Morningside, who invented a dimensional portal that sent him to unknown places before bringing him back to Earth as the monster he is now. He routinely destroys entire towns, leaving zombies in place of the living, pointing to his ability not only to remove individual life, but to eradicate wider culture. The tall man's true objective remains a mystery, but it involves the conquest and occupation of planet Earth. A shapeshifter, the tall man relies on his feminine alter ego, the Lady in Lavender, to seduce hapless men before killing them. This is another interesting psychoanalytic occurrence in Phantasm, the ambivalent function of heterosexual intercourse, which initially promises intimacy and closeness, but ultimately results in total alienation. A theoretical reading of this is Jacques Lacan's proposition of his infamous formula from the early 1970s, Il n'y a pas de rapport sexuel, translated from the French as, there is no relation between the sexes. What is meant by this formula is that no direct, unmediated relation is possible between male and female human beings. Lacan believed that an instinctive relationship cannot be attained because all sexuality is marked by the signifier. Language stands between men and women as a third party. Reciprocity between male and female discursive positions cannot happen because the symbolic order, i.e. language, is asymmetrical. Therefore, according to Lacan, love is an illusion designed to make up for the absence of harmonious relations between the sexes. There is no such thing as a sexual relationship, he said, only between a subject and a partial object. For the man, the objet A occupies the place of the missing partner. In other words, the woman does not exist for the man as a real subject, but only as a fantasy object, the cause of his desire. This extremely alienating feature of sexual intercourse is captured by the tall man's shape-shifting abilities. His Lady in Lavender alter ego discombobulates and ensnares victims through the power of seduction. I think the most important driver of Phantasm is Mike and Reggie's commitment to honor the loved ones they lost by giving them a proper burial. An important theme in one of Lacan's seminars, The Ethics of Psychoanalysis, published in 1959, is staying true to one's convictions and desires. The ancient Greek character Antigone from Sophocles' play is presented by Lacan as a model of ethical conduct. Her brothers, Eteocles and Polynices, have killed each other in battle. Eteocles was fighting on the side of the state, Thebes, and Polynices was attacking it. The ruler of Thebes, Creon, Antigone's uncle, orders that the corpse of Eteocles be buried with full honors, and that the corpse of Polynices be left to be ripped apart by dogs and vultures. Antigone pleads to Creon to give Polynices a proper burial, but Creon does not allow it, as Polynices is considered a traitor to the state. Willfully disobedient, Antigone performs the funeral rites for Polynices anyway, and buries her brother by herself, leading to her arrest. She takes full responsibility for her actions. As a result, Antigone is incarcerated in a tomb where she comes to terms with her own death. Creon represents a strong, overly guarded ego. He cannot tolerate a defiance of his authority, especially from a woman. Conversely, Antigone's action is defined by Lacan as ethical. She is not in flight from responsibility and is not afraid of her desire, proceeding in accordance with it. She is disinterested by the claims of her ego for happiness. She does not procrastinate about something she knows she must do. Antigone represents a principle of ethical conduct. In a similar way, we can interpret Mike and Reggie in Phantasm to uphold the strength of Antigone's moral fortitude, therefore passing the Lacanian test of ethical conduct in terms of always acting in accordance to their desire. Mike and Reggie go through many trials and tribulations in nightmares and psychiatric asylums via interdimensional travel across parallel realities, dodging killer spheres to defeat the malevolent mortician Tall Man, who robs graves and prevents the proper burial of the deceased. Even if they do not succeed in reversing the impact of the Tall Man's destruction, their resistance and open defiance against him, just like Antigone's disobedience against Creon, the king of Thebes, ensures their ethical status in a morally alienated world. Till next time.
A big thank you to the wonderful Mary Wilde. So good to have her back. And don't forget, if you want to hear more from Mary Wilde, she's now also got a Patreon. You can sign up to that and get regular bonus content from her. Just head on over to patreon.com/Mary Wilde. That's patreon.com/Mary Wilde. Okay, Steph, we are hurtling into the sequels now then. So the Phantasm sequels, we're going to go through them one by one, spoiler free, just spend 5 or 10 minutes discussing our thoughts on each and the way in which the series kind of changes and evolves over the next 4 decades following the first movie. So let's begin by talking about Phantasm 2 from 1988.
For 10 years, the secret of Perigord Cemetery has remained a mystery. Now, 3 innocent people are about to discover the ultimate evil.
You think that when you die, you go to heaven. You come to us.
I'll try and do the plot of Phantasm 2. I mean, it's essentially continuing the same thing. Like you said in your plot synopsis of the first one, the whole series really is basically cat and mouse, Reggie and Mike versus the Tall Man, isn't it, really? But this is kind of similar. Mike is now a lot older, 10 years older, obviously, and he's just come out of, I think, a kind of a hospital, a clinic, and as soon as he gets out, Reggie is like, picks him up from the hospital and he's like, I'm going to take you home to meet my family. They can't wait to meet you. Bam, his house blows up. His whole family are dead.
His children die.
The Tall Man is back and is targeting them both. And they're just like, right, let's kill this son of a bitch. And then it becomes a bit more of a sort of action road movie almost, doesn't it? Where you've got Reggie and Mike load up with weapons, 4-barreled shotgun. It's a bit kind of Ash from the Evil Dead, like they make all these kind of homemade weapons, right? And they take this road trip and they go after the Tall Man. And there's also this other stuff involving this woman called Liz, who for some reason has a psychic connection with Mike, and they kind of cross paths at one point. But essentially it's a road trip, and it's kind of a little bit more sort of, there are more guns, more kills, that kind of thing, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot more action. Big guns, making weapons, blowing shit up.
Big guns, exactly. What did you think of Phantasm 2?
I mean, it's not as good as the first, but I think there are still plenty of likeable elements that make it watchable and make it worth watching if you've seen the first one. So, as we mentioned, the studio input and budget was sort of a lot bigger for this film, and as a result, you lose a lot of the surrealism and the dreamlike sequences of the original, which is a big shame.
Yes.
I think no dreams by characters were allowed at all.
I love that. No
a ban on
dreams.
blanket ban on dreams. Sure.
Imagine what David Lynch would say.
Honestly,
oh my God. No
come
dreams. This is unbelievable. Yeah, they really, because I guess by this point the original Phantasm was a big hit, right? It had been that hit by this point, so the studio were confident in pumping some cash into this movie. Yeah,
but they really wanted to. I mean, they made it. They kind of shaped it into an attempt at a more linear plot. So you've got Mike and Reggie going on the road to defeat the Tall Man, as you said. And they bring in this love interest for Mike with Liz, which is slightly bizarre. It's like some sort of psychic catfish situation. I don't know. They haven't met before. They're in love. Fine. Young love.
Psychic catfish. Yeah.
It is.
And it's a bit sort of half-baked, isn't it? Like, you get the feeling they don't really care about a love story in this film.
No, they've like chucked that in, like, you've got to have a love story. Like, that's what this film is missing. And they do it quite it's not fully formed at all, as you say.
Yeah.
But through Liz, I think the film does try and cover some of the same themes as the first film, but through more of a female perspective. So you've got Liz is coming to terms with the death of her grandfather, and is caring for her grandmother, and she is facing the Tall Man and being, sort of hunted by him, and Mike is attempting to come to her aid. So some of those themes are there. They're definitely not fully realised in the same way, and I think it is a really big shame that those dreamlike sequences have completely gone.
Tonally, it feels like it's going more for a sort of action adventure romp, doesn't it? A bit. There are lots of like kind of sort of again sort of bro-y jokes between Reggie and Mike about like, oh, are we going to sleep with this hitchhiker girl?
Yeah.
Oh, it gets really hard out on the road, Mike. Like these kind of like silly,
gross.
Again, sort of like sex jokes or knob gags or that kind of thing.
That's so true. Like, Reggie really lured me in, because the first film I was like, this guy's sweet. He's going to take on, the guardianship of Mike. Like, what a nice, responsible man. Well, he's actually a bit of a creep, isn't he? And
I had to message you about this because I was like, I can't work out. I was like, I need you to tell me, Steph, is Reggie this kind of lovable, boyish kind of, sort of cad, or is he a complete creep? Because he's like constantly trying to get laid throughout all of these films, isn't he? Like with whoever he meets. Yeah.
Every single female they meet, dead or alive, basically, he's trying to leech on. And it's like, in real life, if I met him, I would slap him. Yeah. That would not be acceptable in 2021. Like, he proper just doesn't give it a rest. It's quite... But you're right, it does feed into that kind of bro culture kind of... There's lots of pyrotechnics. There's lots of cars blowing up, houses blowing up, car chases.
Lots of guns.
The kind of... The horror aspect feels a bit more few and far between.
Yeah, I would say so. And interestingly as well, because this was a studio, they were like, we don't want to cast a Michael Baldwin as Mike, which is quite harsh. So the boy that played 13-year-old Mike was replaced by James LeGros, who was a bit more of an 80s star at the time, a bit more of a recognisable name and face.
Yeah.
All the other actors got to stay on, but apart from this 13-year-old boy who was recast, which is quite harsh, I thought.
What did they have against this child? Honestly, it's a little bit mean, isn't it? It's bizarre, as you say, and then we sort of go back to the original actor later. James LeGros is maybe a slightly better actor than a Michael Baldwin. Sorry, did you also know actually that Brad Pitt auditioned for the role of Mike?
No,
for this film.
Can you imagine? Second one?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I read that on the internet. If it's not true, I'm so sorry. Someone might have just made that up, but that's what I read.
It might have been, because he would have been about the right age by 1988.
Imagine if Phantasm 2 had Brad Pitt in it.
Amazing. It would have been one of those stories, wouldn't it? Like Kevin Bacon in Friday the 13th or Johnny Depp in Elm Street. That's amazing. James LeGros, you're right. He's a better actor. But there's something about seeing the original cast together that I think there is something missing from this one because of the recasting of Mike, in a way. I don't care that the other guy isn't as good an actor. I think I'd still rather see him,
I think, as we said, it's that Phantasm Phantasm family, like everyone sticking together throughout these films, making them a labour of love.
I know.
They're friends. They love spending time together, as I like to imagine. They're all the best of buds.
Oh,
poor old
totally.
A. Michael Baldwin. Where is he?
I know, poor guy. And we do get some like cool moments still with the Tool Man in the mausoleums with the sphere. I think in this one there's like an introduction of a gold sphere as well,
which I also don't understand, but it was
no
cool.
idea, absolutely no idea. There's a cool moment where I think that they like rip like a hole in the Tool Man's head, and this like weird tentacle comes out, and all this embalming liquid spews out of him and stuff. There are more practical effects, aren't there, and that kind of thing.
They're slightly more slick, and it feels more body horror, so it kind of makes sense that this is 88. There's lots of creatures coming out of bodies and melting faces and spheres like ripping people apart from the inside, and it's got that kind of body horror feel.
It's kind of the Evil Dead 2, isn't it, of the franchise. It's like it's got that sort of fun, frothy tone. It's got like crazy, wacky body horror. It's got men chainsawing up. It's got that sort of tone, hasn't it, of Evil Dead 2, I think.
Evil Dead and Ash is definitely something that I was thinking about for these other films. And
definitely.
My trivia part 2 is that in one of the scenes, there is an undertaker who is filling a plastic bag, and it's labelled Mr. Sam Raimi.
No way! Oh, I didn't notice that. Amazing. So
I didn't either. Internet.
That's good. So there's probably something quite deliberate then in terms of like Evil Dead references and that kind of thing. I think
so, yeah.
That's really cool. And I guess, in the scope of going forward, the story of the franchise, I guess it also kind of introduces this idea that Mike wasn't just a sort of random victim. Like there is some sort of connection, right, between the Tool Man and Mike that is introduced in this movie where... there is a reason, right, that even 10 years later, the Tool Man seems to be obsessed with finding Mike, and Mike is kind of obsessed with killing him as well. There's this like strange relationship between the two of them that is developing.
They basically love each other. They
love each other.
They love each other. They can't exist without one another. Because there are plenty of opportunities for the Tool Man to kill Mike. Really, could have done so in the first film, but he doesn't want to.
He doesn't want to kill him.
He might have, Mike potentially has a higher, greater purpose. We learn in this film, it is in this film, isn't it, that he's psychic. So, there's a lot going on there. Maybe he has, maybe he's all powerful. There's something that the Tool Man can kind of utilise there, but maybe he just really loves him. And, if you're a baddie, you've got to have... You've got to have the opposing hero,
it's your kind of Michael Myers, Laurie Strode type relationship developing, isn't it?
Who are you? What is your identity if you don't have that person?
Yeah. And of course, we mentioned this, when we're talking about the first one, but by this point as well, Reggie has become as much the star as, if not maybe more the star than Mike, even by this second one, right? Who was this like random friend, the ice cream man in the first one, now is like come forward as the hero of this movie, hasn't he? I think
so much. It's quite an interesting choice.
Really
was it
interesting.
Something about the everyman charm of the character from the first film, or I don't know, maybe Coscarelli just really likes working with Reggie Bannister. I wasn't really sure why Reggie was the one that came forward and Mike slowly takes like a back seat.
I know. I think that's a bit of a shame about Mike, but I think you're dead on. I think Coscarelli in interviews sort of said just watching Reggie and the actors, we should say all the actors have the same names as their characters as well.
They do. Oh my god, I've just realised Michael Baldwin and Mike.
And Reggie Bannister. Reggie is played by Reggie Bannister. And that he loved Reggie Bannister's performance in Phantasm, and he was like, oh, that last scene when they're sat by the fire together and he's like, I'm going to look after you. Coscarelli was like, he blew me away, and he just has something special about him. So I think that was it. He became obsessed with Reggie, basically, from that point onwards. I guess loved working with him as well.
Again, that's kind of nice that, the films kind of went in this direction because of the nice time that they were having, because it's a passion project. They're having a great time together. There might be less of a narrative reason why Reggie's coming to the front, but... Fair enough. If that's what you want to do, you really do get the sense that Coscarelli is mostly just doing what he wants and having fun with it.
Yes. And then after Phantasm 2, I mean, Phantasm 2 was the only one, really, that was like studio budget, theatrical release. Now, from this point onwards, the budget seems to get smaller and smaller. We get into like straight-to-video territory, don't we, with the next three? So Phantasm 3, 1994, Lord of the Dead.
For most of his life, a young man has been pursued by a sinister force. Now he must learn the secret of the ultimate evil.
Now it is time for you to come back to me.
I can't really remember too many plot specifics of this.
I
It's
know.
basically more of the same, right? Mike and Reggie going up against the Toolman, but what's really fun about this one is that along the way they recruit more people into their group, more people that come and help them go up against the Toolman and his minions. So we have the introduction of a really cool new female character called Rocky, also a little boy called Tim. Is it Tim?
Yep, Tim,
and they become a bit more of a kind of posse in this film, don't they? A little bit. And but other than that, it's kind of more of the same, isn't it? Really. But what did you think of part 3?
I mean, it is a bit of a filler film, as you say.
I don't remember the plot.
No,
at all.
I actually can't. I tried to watch. I watched a recap video earlier, and it still just left my brain as soon as it finished. Like I can't grasp the story of this film. It is very much more car crashes, sort of a blend of the previous 2 films with even less substance, really. They are just going over this cat and mouse game again with the Toolman. He is basically Michael Myers and just keeps coming back.
Yes.
But I had a lot of fun with this film. So despite the story being pretty weak, and the fact that it almost kind of adds nothing really to the general mythology around the Toolman.
No.
It kind of got into this familiar groove of sort of recapping at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, taking from where we left off in the last film, jumping into a car chase, visiting some mortuaries, picking up some hot women.
Yeah.
Spears. I kind of liked that. My theory as well, I don't know if you've thought about this or if this is too far reaching, is that at this point I started feeling like this reminded me of Supernatural, the TV show.
100%.
2 brothers getting in a classic car, riding around the country, meeting girls, battling.
I've actually heard people make that comment about.
Oh,
I think
really?
even 2. I think even part 2 that it's the clearly a big inspiration to Supernatural. Like you say, these 2 brothers, these 2 bros on the road, getting up to crazy hijinks and meeting demons along the way, right?
I feel better now. I'm not just stretching for that kind of comparison, but I really had that feeling watching this film. And as you say, the 2 sort of main new characters, Tim and Rocky, I loved this little posse. I loved this kind of Scooby gang. Like, Rocky's amazing. She's great. She takes absolutely no shit. She's looks
incredible.
Amazing. She's beautiful. She's got nunchucks. Like, she's just so cool, and I'm gutted that she didn't feature in the later films because she's so clearly a fan favourite. And I feel like they finally in part 3 got it right with like a female character that I just wish had stuck around.
Yes, totally. She's amazing. I think basically she just like wasn't that fussed about an acting career.
Fair
because
enough.
she's done like 3 films and that's it. I wonder if maybe she just wasn't really like an actor after this movie. But she's so good. You're right. She's clearly she's definitely a fan favorite, isn't she?
Yeah.
I've read. Loved her. As the second you see her on screen, you're like, oh, amazing. Who's this person? You know. And I think by the 3rd movie in, we really needed this, didn't we? Like, we needed a new character. We needed a woman that did more than just sleep with Reggie in a motel.
My God.
And a bit of diversity. Like, it just this was a real like breath of fresh air, I think, as soon as Rocky came into it. Definitely.
That's kind of what I remember from part 3 is like, yes, Rocky arrives. That's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's not so keen on putting up with Reggie's shit because all he does is apparently dream about sex and try and seduce women who don't fancy him. Like, that seems to be his thing, you know. I thought she was I just thought she was great. And Tim's pretty funny as well. He's, you know, this young child. He's funny and resourceful.
Yeah.
He sort of kind of tries to maintain that sort of young adult fantasy charm of the other films, I think,
He
by
does.
involving a kid.
And the way he kind of sets booby traps at the beginning as well. There's a feeling of sort of Home Alone, people under the stairs, again Elm Street or something like that. You know,
he's got these homemade sort of weird and wonderful weapons. So like the frisbee with the blades on it, and he's also suffered a kind of similar loss to a young Mike as well. He's lost his family too.
Yes.
But then after this film, Tim is just murdered, I think, and gone. Yeah, not interested. It's really weird. And yeah, in terms of the sort of mythology, I don't remember much more happening in this. We've got Michael Baldwin back playing Mike as well. Yes.
So that's another really nice thing about this movie. And it's really cool to suddenly, now we're obviously like 15 years on from the first one, so now we suddenly see Mike as a grown-up, like the actual actor that played Mike as a grown-up, which is really cool to see. And again, they kind of play a bit on that connection between him and the Tool Man, and I think I'm right in saying that it's in this film that they start to introduce the idea that the Tool Man maybe wants Mike to be almost like to sort of be a new version of him, to be like a new Tool Man, or to sort of pass the baton on to. He sort of says, I'm going to make you like me or something. And there's a whole sequence where they put a sphere inside Mike's head.
Yes, with the creepy eyes.
Yeah, give him creepy eyes.
Yeah.
So he's trying to not kill him, but make him like him, I think, is the plan in this one. Because there's also a moment when he does catch up with Reggie and Mike, the Tool Man, and Reggie has a grenade. And he's like...
Yes.
I'll kill us both if you're going to take us. It'll be dead. And the Tool Man's like, I don't want him dead, and then leaves again, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's this weird thing where he sort of wants him to join him. I don't know,
like a successor and a friend and a
he just needs a friend.
They just love each other. Just kiss.
All the Tool Man wanted was to be part of this bro group.
I
basically,
think he did. He just wanted to be in the gang. He's actually walking around all of these films going, guys, can you just let me in, please?
Like, I can play guitar. Like, let me come along.
I'm really good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. But I really like it. I think this might be my favourite of the sequels. Purely because of Rocky, because of Tim, and because I don't remember what happened now, but I remember having a lot of fun with what did happen in this film.
It feels like it's pure, mostly fluff fun.
Yes.
And I 100% agreed this is my favourite sequel.
Nice. So there you go. So that was part 3. Then we move into part 4, which was in 1998, Phantasm 4 Oblivion.
For 20 years, the secret of the spheres has remained a mystery. Now, 2 innocent people are about to confront the ultimate evil.
The final game. I'll begin.
Now, I can't really say much about the plot for this one, except that this is the one where we learn the origin story of the Tool Man, right? So this has Civil War flashbacks in black and white.
Film.
Amazing. What did you make of this one?
This is where things start to go a bit pear-shaped, don't they? I almost have no memory of 4 and 5, like they're a big blur.
No, I feel like I dreamed 4 and 5.
Right? Yeah. You can kind of tell that smaller budget, they had to be inventive.
Yes.
The set pieces are less significant. We get no kind of mausoleum, which is a shame because that's sort of become one of my favourite characters. Is a big mausoleum.
Yeah, the budget was like a fifth of the budget of the third one, and the third one was a massive cut from the second one. So the budgets literally get smaller and smaller and smaller. And you're absolutely right that apparently, because when you watch this film, most of it takes place outside, just like on the road, in an empty road.
In the desert?
In the desert? Yeah, exactly. And almost no mausoleum. There are no sets. Basically, they just couldn't afford sets.
Just filming outside.
Yeah,
the whole time.
They're just filming a bunch of them outside, really. And apparently they were given a load of costumes from and extras for free from the Civil War reenactment group.
Okay.
And I think Coscarelli paid a $200 donation to their cause, to their reenactment group, and for that he got all of them as extras in costumes to do these Civil War scenes.
Wow.
And that's kind of how he did it. So it's just proper indie budget filmmaking by this point, you know.
Yeah, it makes you think, like, what came first? Did you think of the Civil War story and then source the costumes, or did you find the costumes and go, we can make this work and we'll put like a Civil War story into this? Because
that's probably more likely.
Yeah, like, generally this film is less interesting to look at, and the story really is quite confusing. Like, there's a lot of time jumps. It's a little bit dull as well.
Yeah, it gets a bit slow, doesn't it? And all this stuff about the tall man being Jebediah, this kind of like friendly, like sort of scientist.
Giant. Yeah.
And I think it's got something to do with he like sort of accidentally opened a portal to another world, right? And that's what started all this. And it somehow turned him into an evil being. And I don't really know why. I don't think it explains why, but that's sort of...
it kind of undoes itself in terms of the mythology of the tall man, because I'd sort of assumed that he was an alien from another dimension or from another planet. And then in this one, it kind of introduces, sort of science and interdimensional travel, and that he makes a portal. He was once a kindly man in ye olde days, and he made this portal and then became kind of, I don't know, it consumed by it and turned evil. So it kind of undoes a lot of...
Yeah. And it gets very complicated. This is where we get into like Chris Nolan territory, right? Because it's like, hang on. This is where we start introducing a sort of multiverse at this point. And they really they double down on that in the fifth one. But this idea of like, you know how in the first one you saw a dream version and a real version, and like maybe both exist at the same time. Maybe what you're watching is two timelines on top of each other, maybe, or something. Like I feel like it's starting to sort of tease that idea at this point, isn't it? Which is insane.
Absolutely is. And I got completely lost, which isn't unusual for me with anything to do with multiverses, or like I can barely keep up with Marvel. It's not easy for me to follow, and I was just getting so confused in this.
Again, I kind of get slight Twin Peaks vibes, right? Twin Peaks The Return.
Yeah.
You've got this idea of sort of time travel and different dimensions. There's like different versions of Laura Palmer and different Dale Coopers and these different worlds existing at the same time and stuff. It's like, it's almost juggling similar types of themes, isn't it?
Yeah.
But in a slightly more cheap, clunky way.
Just not fully fleshed out at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I did like, and that you touched on before, is that they use a lot of sort of unused footage from the first film here, so we get those kind of flashbacks. There's like a nice piece where like Reggie has a memory of his ice cream truck and Mike's tagging along to steal an ice cream in the back, and it kind of gave you that like, friendship, brothers, feelings thing again. But also basically just reminded me how much I like the first film and that I'd rather be watching that.
Yeah, and in that classic way that, and this happens with all franchise, where you suddenly go, oh, how far we've come from the kind of really creepy vibe of the first one. It's not creepy anymore. It's now this complete sort of sci-fi action.
Yeah,
story.
there's not really much horror in this at all, is there?
No,
apart from the spherical boobs.
Oh yeah, the boobs.
The orb boobs, yeah.
The orb boobs, yeah. I mean, again, there's some cool body horror. There is some cool body horror. Yeah. And it's fine. Like, again, I wasn't like not into it to the point where I was like, oh, I want to give up on this now. You know, I was still kind of intrigued to see where this was going to go, and where it went was Phantasm Ravager, which is another 18 years on. I mean, like a massive gap here.
The gaps are huge.
It's insane, right?
Yeah.
So 2016.
There are some schools of thought that suggest the possibility that one could be in two places at once.
This point, we are 37 years on from the original Phantasm, and yet we still have Reggie Bannister, A. Michael Baldwin, and Angus Scrimm. It's amazing. I think even the Lady in Lavender turns up in this movie, right?
She returns,
So brilliant. Don Coscarelli didn't direct this one, and I can't find any information as to why he didn't direct it. Because it's still his story. He still wrote it, but somebody else stepped in to direct it. I have no idea why that is, but the This is like the Buffy season finale of the Phantasm series, right?
You're
where it's
so
like,
right.
now the world is going to be destroyed. But what we get is like two parallel timelines. And it's kind of, what it's doing is very interesting. I just don't quite understand it. Where on the one side, it's the same old thing. You've got this group on the road up against the tall man. The tall man is basically winning because he is destroying town after town after town. And the world seems to have turned into this like Walking Dead kind of post-apocalyptic world, right?
Yeah.
Where there are these like giant floating spheres everywhere. People are being killed. Buildings are being destroyed. It's like a war zone.
Yeah.
Then there is also this other storyline going on at the same time where Reggie is in a hospital and he seems to be suffering from early onset Alzheimer's, and Mike is visiting him and is sort of saying none of this is real, none of this ever happened, and like these two stories are sort of happening in parallel to each other. It's like, it's a weird choice that it's making, isn't it? What did you make of this one?
I had no idea what was going on. Like, no idea. But you're right, yeah, kind of Reggie has been wandering for decades, seemingly, and has that real sort of budget Bruce Campbell vibe where he nicks his car back and he's got guns and he's still on the hunt, and the tall man kind of gives him a choice that he can go back in time and get his family back if he forgets Mike and leaves him, you know, to the tall man. And, you know, it's that question, do you choose your family or do you save the world?
Yeah.
But at the same time, they introduce this concept around aging and dementia, which ties in with the fear of death from the first film, really. So I did like that aspect, and I felt quite emotional about it to see all of these characters, all of these actors age so much, still involved, still around, still firing guns, blowing things up, but they're getting old, man. They're getting old, and it really did,
Reggie Bannister, Michael Baldwin was 55 years old. Reggie Bannister was 70 years old. And Angus Scrimm was 89 years old. And bless him, he passed away before the film actually got released. So this was the last thing he filmed. But that in itself is an amazing thing, I think, right? That it's like, holy shit. This, especially Michael Baldwin, it's like his whole life has basically been defined. Been like, you know, this story has spanned his whole life from childhood to adulthood, and there's something really special about that. And there's something kind of, even though I didn't know what the fuck was going on, and it was really kind of cheap looking. This movie, I mean, it looks quite bad, doesn't it? It looks like it's shot on a sort of cheap digital camera or something.
You're so right. Seeing this film in kind of like Blu-ray high def, when you're used to a certain aesthetic as well, it looks worse than than the original films back in
totally
back in 79 or whatever. The CGI, like the introduction of CGI, the spheres, that makes it look 10 times more naff.
Cheap CGI. It's got that sort of, you know, like that sort of what's that company, like the sort of Sharknado kind of look, isn't it? The sort of movies you see on the Sci-Fi Channel. So it's got that look. But even despite all that, I really was quite sort of moved by it, and I wasn't expecting that at all. But again, I think you're right. It's just because it's actually maybe not in the best way, but it's juggling all these themes of kind of aging and deterioration and death in the kind of mirror image of the first one, that both these movies are about grappling with death, but on opposite ends of the life spectrum. And like, there's something really lovely about it, isn't there? Like thematically, even if technically it isn't great, you know?
Not good. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But as you say, it's all about the heart, and you've still got these characters together. They're still fighting for each other. And as you say, we begin with a young Mike and we end with an elderly Reggie, and it's kind of like the circle of life. And at the end, I was genuine. I messaged you and was like, why am I crying? Why am I crying watching Phantasm 5? Like, this is bananas. But I just had such a fondness for these characters, including Reggie and all his weird pervy flaws. Like, I had really enjoyed spending time with them.
And there's a shot in the three of them in the car at the end where they say something like "hell of a way to start a trio" or something, right?
Stop it!
Which is their first line in the first Phantasm film when one of them dies, and they say "hell of a way to end a trio." So that's the thing. There's like, there's just this feeling, and I don't think this was planned, but there is this feeling that by the time you get to the end of the fifth one, it feels like now you've got a complete whole. Like they've told whatever weird story they planned on telling. And yeah, there's something kind of really lovely about that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, do I actually love this franchise? I don't know if maybe I do. Like this, it kind of it lulls you in somehow, doesn't it? I think
it really does in a way I was not expecting, and it is that character arc. It's like the arc of the story doesn't make any sense, but the journey you have with those characters means a lot. And just had a great time with it. Fourth and fifth film. Will I ever watch them again? I'm not entirely sure, but I would definitely rewatch the first, and I think I would happily watch 1 to 3.
Yeah,
back to back again.
Like 2 and 3 have a really fun vibe and tone, and they do the same thing, and they're really fun films, aren't they? And 1 is really special in its own way. Yeah, 4 and 5, but I really enjoyed this kind of journey of working my way through them all, actually, I've got to say. And then kind of like reading up about them and figuring out, the story of them, I suppose, and the kind of that struggle, that kind of indie filmmaker struggle to actually make all of these films that meant so much to so many fans as well. Again, there's like something really nice about it, I think.
There is.
Okay, and we're going to finish, Steph. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to rank them. What's your rankings of the 5 Phantasms?
Okay, so it has to go Phantasm 1, Phantasm first.
Yep.
The best. Then number 3 is the best sequel, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Then 2. 5, 4?
I think I would go exactly the same as you.
Same. Okay.
Yeah. Because 5 at least had a bit more emotional heft than 4, didn't it?
That's what I was thinking. Neither made sense to me at all, but I was crying by the end, so clearly I had just spent 10 days in self-isolation, but also
and I was in a fever state, so
maybe we were just off our nut. What are we doing?
I don't know, but I think that's the way you need to watch the Phantasm series. So there you go. I mean, like it's been a fun journey, Steph, hasn't it? Doing these 5 films together, back to back like this. I'm kind of glad that I've seen them finally. It's like ticking them off the list.
Me too. I had a great time. It was a very intense period. Watching these films almost back to back, and having not known anything really about them I don't know, a month ago. But really glad I did it.
I love it. Well, there you go. Well, Steph, final question for you, which I've been asking everyone. What's your favourite sci-fi horror movie from this subgenre, if you had to pick a fave?
Oh, God. The Thing is a real big cop-out, isn't it?
But it's a perfect film, isn't it?
Yeah. I was also thinking that some of my more recent favourite films have arguably fall within this genre. So things like Annihilation, Under the Skin... Mandy, Cabin in the Woods, like all of these films you could, in some way or another are about aliens or cosmic horror. So dual answer. I think The Thing is the runaway star of this of any alien film, actually, not even just alien horror films. But there are some very good
film.
Just one of the best. But there are certainly quite a few recent films that I've really, really enjoyed too.
Good. Well, Steph, thank you so much for joining me. As ever, it's been such a joy. And just tell us where people can find you and more of your stuff out there online.
You can find me on Twitter at Steph McKenna. And if you find me on there, you'll find details of my podcasts, The Thirst for Pop Culture and The Writing Life, for interviews with writers of all forms.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you once again to this week's brilliant guest, Steph McKenna. I loved that. I absolutely loved that. I think this series is a revelation to me, guys. I think Phantasm might now be one of my favourite horror franchises. It was quite a joy getting to sit through all 5 of these in succession, and I would hugely recommend them to all of you guys if you haven't had the chance to watch through them all. But I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you guys agree with us? Disagree with us? Let us know what you made of the incredibly weird Phantasm. Email me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Letterboxd. And if you want to discuss this week's episode, this week's films with fellow listeners, join the discussion group. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group, and that can be found on Facebook. If you want to support this podcast and everything we do here, then you can sign up to our Patreon and get regular bonus content. Patreon.com/Evolution of Horror. You can find all previous seasons and episodes of this podcast on our website, evolutionofhorror.com. You can find this podcast in all the normal podcast platforms. And if you get a sec, please do spare a minute or two to drop us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, which we would be hugely grateful for, as it really helps us get discovered by new listeners. Okay, well, onwards and upwards to next week. We're going from a small little lesser known indie gem to one of the biggest and most successful horror movies ever made. It's the big one. It's the one that we've been working towards this whole series so far. Next week, I'm going to be joined by film producer and longtime friend of the pod, Jen Handorf, and we're going to be discussing one film and one film only, Ridley Scott's Alien from 1979. Holy shit. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.